On a warm June night in 2002, a 14-year-old girl lay sleeping in the bedroom she shared with her younger sister in one of Salt Lake City's safest neighborhoods. Within hours, she would be gone taken at Knifepoint by a bearded stranger who believed God had commanded him to make her his child bride. Her name was Elizabeth Smart, and for the next 9 months she would endure a nightmare that defied comprehension. Elizabeth Ann Smart was the second of 6 children in a devout Mormon family that seemed to embody the American dream. Her father Ed ran a successful real estate business, while her mother Lois spent her days homeschooling the younger children and coordinating their busy household. At 14, Elizabeth was the responsible older sister, the one who helped her mother with dinner, who practiced harp for hours until her fingers were sore, and who still tucked her 9-year-old sister Mary Catherine into bed each night. The Smarts lived in a sprawling home in the Federal Heights neighborhood, where children rode bikes until dark, and neighbors looked out for one another. Elizabeth's bedroom window overlooked the Wasatch Mountains, and she often fell asleep counting the lights twinkling in the valley below. She was preparing to start high school that fall, excited but nervous about leaving the comfort of homeschooling. Her biggest concerns were whether she'd make new friends, and if she'd have time to continue her harp lessons. On the evening of June 4th, 2002, the Smart family had attended an award ceremony where Elizabeth's younger brother received recognition for his school achievements. They'd gone out for ice cream afterward. Elizabeth chose mint chocolate chip, her favorite since childhood. Back home, she'd practiced a new harp piece she was learning, Pachelbel's Canon, while her father worked in his study, and her mother got the younger children ready for bed. That night, Elizabeth wore her favorite red silk pajamas, a recent gift from her grandmother. She and Mary Catherine had stayed up whispering about their plans for summer vacation. Their parents had promised a trip to their family's ranch in Wyoming, where Elizabeth loved to ride horses and swim in the creek. She was especially excited because she'd convinced her parents to let her bring her best friend Jessica along this year. Around 10:30 p.m., Lois Smart had come in to say goodnight, reminding the girls to say their prayers. Elizabeth had hugged her mother extra tight that night, not for any particular reason, just one of those spontaneous gestures of affection that Lois would replay in her mind thousands of times over the coming months. The house settled into quiet, and somewhere around midnight, Elizabeth had finally drifted off to sleep. But at approximately 2:00 a.m., Mary Catherine woke to see a tall figure standing between their beds. At first, she thought it was her brother or father checking on them. But then the man spoke, and his voice was unfamiliar. "I have a gun. Get up and come with me." The man had a knife at Elizabeth's throat. And Elizabeth, trying to protect her sister, whispered urgently to Mary Catherine. "Don't say anything." Mary Catherine lay frozen, pretending to sleep as she watched the bearded stranger force her sister out of bed. Elizabeth asked if she could get her shoes, and the man agreed, but his knife never left her vicinity. Through barely open eyes, Mary Catherine saw her sister's red pajamas disappear into the hallway with the intruder. And so naturally, the 9-year-old faced an impossible decision. Every instinct told her to scream, to run for her parents, but Elizabeth's urgent whisper echoed in her mind. What if the man really did have a gun? What if making noise got her sister killed? Therefore, she waited 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 until she was certain they were gone. When Mary Catherine finally crept to her parents' bedroom, she was shaking so violently she could barely speak. "Elizabeth is gone," she managed to say. Ed Smart jolted awake, initially thinking his daughter had had a nightmare, but the terror in Mary Catherine's eyes was real, and when he rushed to the girl's bedroom and found Elizabeth's bed empty, a window screen cut, the horror began to sink in. The 9/11 call was placed at 3:58 a.m. Within minutes, police flooded the Federal Heights neighborhood with searchlights and bloodhounds. But investigators quickly discovered something troubling. The cut screen appeared to be a decoy. The real point of entry seemed to be through the kitchen door, suggesting someone who knew the house layout. Even more disturbing, Mary Catherine remembered a crucial detail: the kidnapper had called Elizabeth by name. This meant one terrifying thing: this wasn't a random abduction. Someone had been watching the Smart family, studying their routines, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now Elizabeth was out there somewhere in the vast Utah night with a person who had planned this carefully. The massive search operation that followed became one of the largest in Utah history. Thousands of volunteers combed the mountains and valleys surrounding Salt Lake City. The Smart family, prominent in both business and religious communities, used every connection they had. Ed Smart appeared on national television pleading for his daughter's return, his voice breaking as he spoke directly to the kidnapper. Please let her go. She's just a child. But as days turned to weeks, disturbing patterns emerged. Several neighbors reported seeing a disheveled man doing odd jobs in the neighborhood in the months before the kidnapping. A man the Smarts had actually hired once to help with roof repairs. His name was Emmanuel, though investigators would later discover this was an alias. The real name of the man who had taken Elizabeth was Brian David Mitchell, and this is where the story takes its darkest turn. Mitchell wasn't just a drifter looking for work. He was a self-proclaimed prophet who believed God had commanded him to take 7 young wives to fulfill his destiny. Along with his legal wife, Wanda Barzee, Mitchell had constructed an elaborate religious fantasy where kidnapping children was not a crime, but a divine mission. Meanwhile, Elizabeth was enduring unimaginable horror just miles from her home. Mitchell had taken her to a crude campsite in the mountains above Salt Lake City, where he performed what he called a marriage ceremony with Barzee as witness. For months, Elizabeth was chained, threatened, and subjected to daily abuse, while Mitchell preached his twisted religious doctrine. But what made this case even more agonizing was what happened next. As summer turned to fall, Mitchell grew bolder. He began taking Elizabeth out in public, first to parties in the mountains where other homeless camps gathered, then incredibly into Salt Lake City itself. He forced her to wear religious robes and a veil, threatening to kill her family if she tried to escape or reveal her identity. The most heartbreaking near miss came in August. Mitchell brought Elizabeth to a house party where multiple people were present. One woman looked at the veiled girl and felt something was wrong. She even asked Elizabeth directly if she needed help, but Elizabeth, terrorized by months of threats and manipulation, remained silent behind her veil. The woman's instincts were right. She was looking directly at the most wanted missing child in America. But the moment passed. Therefore, the investigation stalled. Despite one of the largest manhunts in American history, despite Elizabeth's face on every news channel and milk carton, she remained hidden in plain sight. The Smart family hired private investigators, consulted psychics, and followed every lead, no matter how unlikely. Ed Smart later said the not knowing was worse than death. At least death had finality. This was daily torture. But in October, Mary Catherine had a sudden memory breakthrough. The man's face had been nagging at her, and suddenly she remembered. Emmanuel was the man who had done work on their house. When investigators finally had a real lead to pursue, they discovered Brian David Mitchell's criminal history and religious delusions. His photo was released to the media, and tips began pouring in. But Mitchell had already fled Utah with Elizabeth and Barzee, heading to California where they lived as religious pilgrims, with Elizabeth still hidden beneath robes and veils. On March 12, 2003, exactly 9 months and 1 week after Elizabeth's abduction, the impossible happened. Several motorists in Sandy, Utah, spotted 3 figures walking along State Street, a bearded man, an older woman, and a young girl in religious robes and a gray wig. The callers said something about the group seemed off, that they matched the description from recent America's Most Wanted segments about Mitchell and Barzee. 2 police officers approached the trio. When they asked the young girl to remove her veil, Mitchell immediately protested, claiming it was against their religion. But the officers insisted, and so, in that moment on a busy Utah street, as traffic rushed past and shoppers went about their day, the veil was lifted. The first thing Officer Troy Rasmussen noticed were her eyes, bright blue eyes that seemed both terrified and hopeful. "Are you Elizabeth Smart?" he asked. The girl initially denied it, the response automatic after months of threats. But Rasmussen pressed further. "Your family has missed you so much. They've never stopped looking for you." At those words, something broke inside Elizabeth. 9 months of survival mode, of careful responses designed to keep her and her family alive, suddenly crumbled. "I am Elizabeth. she whispered, and then louder, as if testing the weight of her own name. "I am Elizabeth Smart." The radio call went out at 12:43 p.m. "We have her. Elizabeth Smart is alive." Within minutes, the parking lot was swarming with police cars. Mitchell and Barzee were arrested without incident, though Mitchell continued proclaiming his innocence, insisting Elizabeth was his wife by divine decree. But for Elizabeth, the nightmare was finally over. As she sat in the back of the police car, watching Mitchell being handcuffed, Officer Rasmussen asked if there was anything she needed. Her response revealed both the depth of her trauma and her incredible resilience. "I want to see my mom and dad, and I want to play my harp again." Within an hour, Elizabeth was reunited with her family at the Salt Lake City Police Department. Lois Smart later described the moment. "When I saw her, I thought I was dreaming. I was afraid if I blinked, she would disappear again." The girl who walked back into their lives was changed thinner, quieter, marked by experiences no child should endure, but she was alive, and she was home. Brian David Mitchell was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. During his trial, he sang hymns and refused to cooperate, maintaining his prophet persona to the end. Wanda Barzee received 15 years and was released in 2018, though she remains under supervised probation and is prohibited from contacting the Smart family. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is what Elizabeth chose to do with her trauma. Instead of retreating from the world, she became one of America's most prominent advocates for child safety and survivor support. She established the Elizabeth Smart Foundation, wrote books about survival and healing, and has helped recover numerous missing children through her activism. Today, Elizabeth is married with 3 children of her own. She still plays the harp, the same harp she dreamed of during those 9 months of captivity. And sometimes, when she tucks her own children into bed at night, she holds them a little tighter, knowing firsthand how precious and fragile safety truly is.